this episode of the Futures in Digital Learning podcast, we are joined by Josh Herron and Kaitlin Garrett from the Online Learning Consortium to discuss microlearning and its impact on teaching and learning. Join us as we dive into the pros and cons of microlearning, as well as ways to incorporate it into your teaching. Hello and welcome to the Futures in Digital Learning podcast. Once again, I am Adam Davey, one of your hosts, and I'm joined here by my co-host Brian Hale. Hey, Brian.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing?
And I'm officially calling this the start of season 4, just because we had a little break after our last episode, as things got a little crazy with the beginning of the year. So arbitrarily, I'm saying this is the beginning of season 4 of the podcast.
I can't believe this is season 4.
Right?
I mean, it feels like yesterday that we start. I mean, maybe 2 weeks ago that we started
Yeah.
this, but now we're already on season 4.
Yeah.
Time flies.
It does. It really does. And we are super excited to be joined on this first episode of season 4 by two folks from the Online Learning Consortium. Josh Herron, who is the Director of Professional Learning at the OLC, and Kaitlin Garrett, an instructional designer. I've personally been involved with OLC in a variety of ways for many years now. So it's exciting that we finally get somebody from OLC to come on the podcast and chat with us. And we're going to chat today a little bit about microlearning. So Josh and Kaitlin, welcome.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, we're excited to be on your season opener.
Yeah.
Wait a second. I have a question. What does OLC stand for?
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
So we are the Online Learning Consortium.
Yeah, I wanted to have fun with that for a second just and see if you wanted to try, Brian. But yeah, it's probably best for us if we just name it, right? Online Learning Consortium. We used to be the Sloan Consortium back in the day,
Yeah.
and then became the Online Learning Consortium when we moved into a self-sustaining nonprofit enterprise.
And I'm sure many of our listeners have attended one of the two major conferences, OLC Innovate or OLC Accelerate, over the years. There's also been some smaller events that have happened regionally, at various places that I'm sure people have attended. I know some of our listeners went through the IELOL program, which is
Yeah.
the Institute for Emerging Leaders in Online Learning.
Mhm.
This sounds like a big plug for OLC right here, but I know that's just no, it's been a great organization to get involved with if you're in the online learning world. So we're
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. And you plugged our conferences, right? Which is
yeah.
typically what we're known for. But you're going to learn a lot about our Center for Professional Learning, our online workshops and certificate programs today that I always like to mention as a sort of a hidden gem of the org, where we
Yeah.
have a lot of our community members participate. So we're talking about that.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, Josh. Thank you, because I'm super excited to talk about that, especially in terms of microlearning. So before we get into any of that, first tell me like what exactly is microlearning and how does it differ from other learning approaches?
Great question, because microlearning is similar to a lot of the ideas in our space of digital learning and innovative teaching and learning practices. Sometimes just thrown around as a word, right?
Hmm.
Without a lot of meaning. So I'm glad we're digging into that. I love defining terms and
Yeah,
setting where we're at. So uh, the first thing I want to talk about is kind of how we got here, how we got to micro learning.
yeah,
Um, and it's interesting. I did a little digging, and the Horizon report. So EDUCAUSE's Horizon report now, right? Used to be New Media Consortium, but back in the day, microlearning was not part of the trends, right? But gamification was.
yeah,
So 2012 to 2014, we had gamification, and then we had mobile learning on and off through 2012 to 2019. And mobile learning is my area of passion. My dissertation was on mobile learning and writing, the impact of mobile learning on that field. And then in 2021 is when we first saw micro credentials, right? Which we can
Hmm.
talk about that distinction. But I think micro learning is this. I like to make the connections between all the other buzzwords out there, right? I think it's a link to this idea of accountability of
Hmm.
outcomes, right? That we can have specific measurable things that we're working towards. And I was involved in competency-based education for a while at a previous institution, and that's a big part of the direction higher ed is moving. I think micro learning plays a
Hmm.
role in that. Affordability, right? Because if we can chunk things up, it's not just good for learning, but it's good for paying for what we need at and when we need it. And then personalized, right? Everyone's pathway is different, and we try to model that in the PD that we're so PD professional development that
Hmm.
we're offering to our community, and we do that through pathways and personas, right? So we're trying
Okay.
to shift and change just as our institutions were. And this was something happening before I joined the org about 2.5 years ago. Kaitlin and our previous director, who's now our VP of Innovation, Dylan Barth, and our instructional designers, Cindy Shanky and Elizabeth Stucklin, we're working on this Personas and Pathways project. And we've made this a big deal that if we're going to talk about this for our students, we need to talk about it for ourselves, right? What are the skills pathways that we need as professionals in higher ed, in the digital learning space, and then the personas, right? And so our micro learning library is a big part of that. And Caitlin's going to give us a lot of detail on how we built that out and what went into that. Um, but for the most part, micro learning is short, focused learning experiences, often
Okay.
videos, interactive exercises, quick assessments with specific learning objectives, right? And it breaks things down into digestible standalone units. One of the things I love about microlearning is that it can be a just-in-time learning,
Hmm.
and that's something that's important to me as a researcher and proponent of mobile learning. Is that we have the ability to learn in an authentic environment, right? So that if we're doing something and we need to have a quick refresher, right? We can pull something up that we know is going to help us or learn something on the fly, right? I learn things all the time on YouTube on the fly that I can fix
Right.
around the house. And we're seeing it everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
not just YouTube, right? But Blue Sky, which I recently joined, has added videos now. LinkedIn
Okay.
has videos now. So this
Hmm.
this idea of micro learning is taking off. But the one thing I want to add to is that we think and would champion the idea that it's part of a larger learning ecosystem and it's intentionally designed. Right. While
Okay.
there are elements of micro learning out there, we think there's still the important aspect, and we know there's still the important aspect of intentionally designed. And so often those micro learning experiences lead toward a micro credential, right? Which is also
Hmm.
one of those terms that gets confused.
Yeah.
So for us at OLC, we have those too, right? We have micro credentials, so 3 workshops bundled together
Right.
to one micro credential. And so, yeah, that's a little bit around the background of what we mean when we're talking micro learning, credentials. There are a ton of really cool places doing this. So Alamo Colleges comes to mind, right? The
Hmm.
work that Luke Dowden and others there have done. Education Design Labs has a great approach with prior learning, CBE, and we can share some of this in show notes probably, right? And then University of Texas System, uh, they have really gone all in with Coursera and building in micro credentials. I've seen
Yeah.
it in smaller scales, right? The previous
Hmm.
university I was at, they built in a Six Sigma into an MBA program, right? And then they broke that MBA program into certificates as they tried to figure out how can we achieve what those aims we were just talking about through
Right.
micro learning, micro credentialing. So I'll stop the little overview there.
No, that's great. And kind of what I'm hearing is, an analogy here is that it's kind of like a menu of learning, right? Little bits that you
Mm,
can kind of pick and say like, all right, well, if I'm, interested in this, but maybe I don't want to take like, a 16-week course on it, right? I just want to
yeah.
like dive into it a little bit, get to know it. I can take this and I can jump over here and and get my appetizer over here. I can get my entree, I can get my dessert. Like, these little bits off the menu and and like you said, maybe put it together into a larger credential, right?
Hmm.
Potentially, but essentially just really kind of getting a taste of uh, in small doses all these little things. And and for those who are checking, that's our first kind of food analogy of the season. So um, that's a trend of ours. That we get real hungry when we record these podcasts, but I like that idea of giving people options and like you said, easily digestible um, bits. And so why, what is the benefit of that? Like, what is the draw to people for that type of learning? Obviously, like time is probably the easiest one, right? Like, people's time commitments are, but what are some other kind of draws that people have for this type of learning?
Want me to hop in?
Yeah, go ahead, Kaitlin. I know we both were going to tackle a little bit of this one, but I've talked a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, no. You touched on a couple of the key points that I wanted to make as well of kind of the idea of like changing attention spans, especially in
Okay.
our current learner behaviors,
Hmm.
their preferences, and just due to technological advancements. Today's digital learners have access to an overwhelming amount of information.
Yeah.
If you think back before the internet, if people were around then, if you wanted to know something, you had to go to the actual library, right? And check out a
Right.
book and look through an encyclopedia. But now I can just Google literally anything, sometimes the most random things that I didn't know that I needed to know. um, but today's learners, like Josh mentioned, are so used to this informal type of learning, learning through those short videos
Okay.
on
Hmm.
YouTube. TikTok is another huge one.
Yeah.
Josh already gave that example of watching YouTube videos to fix stuff around the house, which
Hmm.
is what my husband relied on when we were renovating our house.
Yeah.
Things I didn't think he knew how to do and learned on the
Yeah.
fly. Or even things like spending 15 minutes a day to learn a new language, and Duolingo is
Mm.
another
Yeah.
popular form of
Okay.
microlearning. Also, just the number of like potential distractions has that have significantly increased along with technology, where we're having to constantly choose between competing demands on our attention. So, for example, we've only been talking, let's see, like 10-ish minutes here. How many emails or Slacks or social media or God forbid breaking news notifications have you
Mm.
received? Um, but microlearning really addresses those attention span challenges by delivering those short, targeted, and highly focused learning experiences that are easier to fit into your busy schedule. And then we also touch a little bit on like addressing those learning gaps, I think is where it really comes into play. Um, and I can go more in depth about that whenever I talk about the design of OLC's microlearning library and how that came about. But really, like you mentioned, Adam, there's so many times where learners just need just in time knowledge
Mm.
rather than an entire course or
Yeah.
topic. Um, for example, I just watched a webinar last week where the University of Alabama was showcasing their AI teaching network that they developed for their faculty, which was essentially a library of short practical video clips explaining various use cases and advice for responsibly using generative AI in their teaching practices. So, especially in relation to like rapidly evolving AI landscape that we're in right now, it's constantly changing. Microlearning has helped fill those gaps by providing that like right content at the right time, whether it's a refresher, a skill update, or a quick application of knowledge.
I'm just thinking of you mentioned Duolingo, and I just hit 425 days on my Duolingo streak, and I'm
Nice.
like
Yeah.
quite proud of that. But yeah, those are little things that I didn't even think of really as something that is micro learning, right? It
Hmm.
was just something like, oh, this is fun, and I want to learn a language, like you know. Um, but uh, but yeah, that's I I like that idea of kind of changing attention spans. And I talk with students all the time about like their, you know, being bombarded with information and how you slow that down, right? And how you can focus on things like that, on, changing how you, I guess, get that input, right? Um, and it's harder, right, for 18 to 20-year-olds, I'm sure, to balance that than it is for maybe adult learners. who are coming back to school to get an online degree, perhaps, or even faculty who have been teaching for however many years and need to learn something new to put in their class, and go from there. So I am curious to dive into this micro learning library and how it got developed and what the topics are that you chose to present on, and how you got to those, how you made those decisions to say like, okay, this is what we think people want and need, and this is how we're going to approach it and tackle it. So what kind of went into that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have anything that you want to
No,
jump in first with you?
you go ahead.
Okay. So the microlearning library actually came to fruition from my final project in the Eye of the Well program that you had mentioned, Adam. 2024, best
Yeah.
cohort ever. Just gonna put it out there. um, but yeah, so at OLC, we built our microlearning library as part of a broader professional development ecosystem. So it sits alongside our longer workshops, our certificate programs, and webinars, offering quick hit learning experiences that align with our skills pathways and personas that we mentioned. So our approach assures that learners can move seamlessly between these different programs, creating a cohesive learning ecosystem. It was an intentional process based on what we were seeing in the field. So our Center for Professional Learning, we frequently survey our community to help
Mhm.
understand the perceived quality of our programs, identify any gaps or potential areas for growth. And our self-paced workshops continue to be a popular choice due to their flexibility. We're constantly receiving feedback about wanting more self-paced options and specifically more micro-learning content that can be completed in 1 hour or less compared to our traditional workshops that typically take about 6 to 8 hours to complete.
Mhm.
Um, so I can go more into the design later because that's kind of a lengthy answer. I've got
Yeah.
like a whole process if you want to hear, but just at high level, our microlearning modules, they're based on those skills pathways personas. So ensuring that each module fits within a clear scaffolded learner journey. Our pathways range
Okay.
from topics related to teaching and learning with AI, accessibility, course design strategies, and effective online facilitation. And then the primary personas that we target include faculty and instructors, instructional support, student support, and institutional leadership. The modules are focused on real world applications, so ensuring that each module leads to immediate skill development. So, for example, there's a module in our accessibility pathway on how to write effective alternative text for images. And includes various practice opportunities throughout to actually implement that newly gained knowledge. They're
Cool.
developed in
Okay.
Articulate Rise, which allows
Okay.
for interactive and engaging content delivery rather than just passive lectures.
Mhm.
They're consistent in format, so it makes it easy to pick up where you left off. And they're most importantly relevant and timely. So new modules are added quarterly to help support continued upskilling and reskilling. Being able to offer
Mhm.
those smaller chunks of content actually allows us to be more agile in our development efforts and provide a more timely response to those in-demand hot topics. Definitely AI has been one of those for
Oh,
sure.
oh, really?
Um, yeah, you'd say. But yeah, we've seen great engagement so far from
Mm.
educators, instructional designers, just who need that quick, impactful
Mhm.
learning experience kind of in between our longer programs.
So my next question would be, I think this might be a good time for this question. How do I get to look at the library of these items and maybe see if are they free? Do I need an OLC membership? How do I dip my toe in the waters here? Because I'm sure our listeners right now are probably going to olc.org, which they're going to find out very quickly is the wrong URL.
Yeah, so great questions, right? And the correct URL is onlinelearningconsortium.org. Kind of lengthy, but yeah, do a Google search, you might find it quicker than typing it in. I know, at least for me sometimes. So from there, on our brand new website, we have a professional learning tab, and there's information there around um, our offerings. And one of those is the um, uh, under the workshops is this idea of a workshop pass plus. And so Kaitlin mentioned that we have this microlearning built into a larger ecosystem of offerings, right? So we have 3 and 7 day workshops, and that's our the bulk of our portfolio right now. Some of those are also self-paced, but the bulk of our portfolio is the 3 and 7 day workshops, and then we have 4 week workshops, and then we have several certificate programs, right? And so this idea of the micro learning library is we don't want it to replace any of those, and we know that it can't, right? Because micro learning is just in time refresher, or Adam, you mentioned earlier, sort of a teaser into
Hmm.
a topic. And so what we've done, and this is intentional for the reasons I just mentioned, is packaged it with our workshop pass. So we call it Workshop Pass Plus. It's this idea that if your institution purchases 10 seats, which is it's kind of common approach is a workshop pass is 10 seats. We now have Workshop Pass Plus that says, all right, for those same 10 seats, you get 10 seats to the micro learning library. So you can have folks enrolled in our offerings, but then on their own time, they can go into the micro learning library, which has now the about 18 micro learning modules, and growing, but it's with access to that for an institution, with access to the workshop passes. We do sell individual subscriptions, and those are about the price of a workshop, a little bit more than the price of a workshop. But it's also meant to be, a foray into or uh, entry point into the other programs, which is why they're skills based, and within those skills pathways. So easiest way is onlinelearningconsortium.org, professional learning. Check out the workshop pass plus, and the info about professional learning, or email one of us and we'll get you into the right hands as well and can provide that information.
So I'm real curious because we are starting to revamp our own professional development offerings here. That's within our unit, UCAT at the University of Arizona. We're a centralized teaching and learning center, and that supports faculty both in face-to-face courses and online courses. So the team that Brian and I are on, instructional design team, we work primarily with online courses, but we do have teams in our unit that work with face-to-face courses as well. So our professional development offerings, kind of have to hit on all of those subjects and whatnot. But my question here is, because as we're thinking about, how do we get people in, and then how do we get people coming back, right? And I heard you, Kaitlin and Josh, talk about, upskilling and reskilling and those those terms, and kind of tying it into more certificate programs and paths and workshops and stuff. So how do you have, like, what do those pathways look like, I guess, is my question, as I attempt to steal some of your ideas and incorporate them into our own. But how did you build those pathways of, like, okay, let's start here and let's build these skills and keep growing them, and then, like, if you want to come back, like, let's say, like, oh, I have this interest, but I did this, but now I want to come back, and it's something new and different, right? I think that's the problem, is, like, if we keep offering the same things over and over again with no kind of path to growth, we're going to start losing our audience, right?
Absolutely. Right. And having worked in faculty development for a number of years, can totally relate, right?
Yeah,
And same sort of
yeah,
situation of you're serving multiple disciplines,
yeah.
multiple modalities, all of these
Hmm.
things. And so yeah, we actually frame it as we went from a topics and tools approach.
Okay.
So, how we're going to do this topic today, and we're going to talk about this tool, right? To
Hmm.
personas and pathways and the skills pathways. And so We can provide the link to all of the skills pathways, but we start with what does a digital learning professional need to know based on the persona that they are. So we have faculty, instructional
Mhm.
designers, leaders, and then we also have student support personnel, which is something we did
Okay.
the first year I was here was we added in student support because we thought, well, what are the personas that impact a student, a learner, right? And so then from there, we looked at, well, what do folks need to be able to do? And part of that was a landscape analysis survey. Some of us looking at our existing offerings and feedback there. We use our conference data to support making some decisions and what are skills that people are looking for. And so then we show folks, right? This is what you're building towards. So if you're interested in adaptive and gamified learning, right, as a skill, developing that
Mhm.
skill, we have a pathway for you. So we have workshops on uh, gamification principles, game-based learning, digital badges, learning analytics, right, that show you that this isn't learning analytics work, a week-long learning analytics workshop, right? Not going to
Mhm.
do, I mean, it's going to do you some good if you're interested in it,
Yeah.
but we want you to have it as a pathway towards something that you're now able to do in your courses. And we know based on the surveys that we've done, folks don't want longer programs. That was one, I'll say, miscalculation I made when I first came in. I thought, we need more 4-week workshops. People want to dig into this stuff. And they actually
They
say they
don't.
do, but they
Yeah.
don't, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
They want us to show them how this is all adding up.
Yeah.
And our micro credentials do that. And then micro learning, right, is another way of saying, all right, now you've you're familiar with the skills pathway. If you want to keep learning, right, you've earned that credential, micro credential. Keep learning with our micro learning library that also has a dedicated pathway around this. And it really comes back to I love the flexibility because and I
Mhm.
love the Duolingo example because you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that. It's like when we talk about AI and
Yeah.
people are like, oh yeah, talk to Alexa. I didn't realize I'm doing natural language processing, right? It's so much around us, and that is
Mhm.
kind of what we want for um, faculty and staff who are taking professional development. Not a I got to go learn this tool, right? I got to go
Right.
learn Canvas now. Got to go learn Brightspace. It's
Right.
like no, we're gonna help you engage with your learners, right? So
Mhm.
we're gonna help you effective online facilitation is one, or how do you conduct assessments, in a way that engages learners or helps, measure what you want to measure. And so showing them what they're going to be able to do and then breaking into pieces that they can achieve and see some achievement is the approach there. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to add any
Yeah, no,
more
I
to
was
that.
just
Yeah.
thinking that like this is feeling very meta to me because I was thinking like this is the way you should design microlearning is to help lower that cognitive load. And I think that's what we're doing
Mm,
with our pathways of like,
Yeah.
okay, take this workshop first, here's 1 week, dive into it, and then do this next.
Mhm.
And just another example that popped into my mind, like around cognitive load, is like the Netflix model. So like Netflix would be like, "Hey, do you want to watch a 10-hour movie?" And you're like,
Yeah.
"No,
Oh.
absolutely not. That sounds terrible. I've got other things to do." And then they're like, "All right, well, what if we break it up into 30-minute episodes and you just watch
mm,
it all in one sitting?" And then you're like, "Yes, I'm in." um, but so just like these concepts around memory and attention and motivation, I think is one of the benefits to like microlearning and just how we've designed our pathways and library, but it's also one of the challenges too. Just speaking, if you're thinking about implementing this with your faculty or designing microlearning and pathways around this, that even though there's a lot of research on this topic, we do still see a challenge in higher ed specifically about not being accustomed to this format. But I really think that's where the role of instructional designers come into play while working with faculty. Just that might be new, especially to the online learning environment, or even face to face of like wanting to record their 1 hour lectures and post them as content. And the ID can kind of step in and help with figuring out how can we get those key concepts across in a
Yeah.
shorter, more focused content that's easier for
Mhm.
students to absorb and recall.
Yeah. I so that's a good segue. I think as well as thinking we've been talking a lot about this in terms of professional development and that type of learning, but what about in academic courses? Like, how can we take this concept of microlearning and as instructional designers, work with faculty to build that into their online courses? And what would that look like?
I want to play devil's advocate with Adam here for a second, and then you both can respond. Adam, my course is already set up as a micro-credentialed course. That's why I've broken it up into weekly or modular set. Okay, that's my entire course. I've broken down into week-long things. So, and gosh, I don't have the time to learn how to use TikTok to make videos. I don't. I'm already giving them micro learning when I do my video announcements for a minute and 30 seconds. What so take Adam's question and then add my exasperated instructor to it, and what kind of response will we get from you both?
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and I'd say that you are on the right track with your weekly modules. That's definitely better than just plopping everything in your course shell. But I would say designing effective microlearning isn't just about making the content short. It's about making it structured and impactful. So another key point is that like it's not really ideal for conceptual learning, but works better for this practical skills-based learning that can be delivered in focused standalone segments. So there is a fantastic guide by NC State on how to get started with microlearning that really helped me a lot when I was designing our microlearning modules. And I'll kind of summarize here because it's a fantastic guide for instructional designers or educational technologists if you're working with faculty. But really first starting off with defining your learning objectives. So that's the key point here, I think, is that what are those specific skills or concepts you want students to master? And then really being clear and focused about it to create concise, effective microlearning modules. So focusing on one, it's very hard to do in practice. But after you've got those learning objectives, breaking down your content into those more micro lessons. So those more manageable focus units that should address just one single concept or skill. So for example, if you're teaching chemistry, the concept of chemical bonds might be a week-long topic that you cover, but it could be broken down into smaller lessons. So one quick lesson on covalent bonds, one on ionic bonds, one on metallic bonds. There's debate about the ideal length of each module, but it really depends on the content and the learner's needs. Some of the research suggests like 3 to 10 minutes is kind of the sweet spot for a single microlearning module. Anything over 15 minutes can start to lose effectiveness, especially just like in pure video format. And then some of like a longer module, so like closer to 10 minutes are good for more conceptual topics with interactive elements combined in there to keep the learner engaged. So once you've got those learning objectives and your content chunked out, that's when you can choose the best type of microlearning format to meet those objectives. So there's different tools that might align best with your content and instructional goals. And I can go through a couple examples of what that could look like too. So it's best to use video and multimedia for visual topics that require demonstration, like quick tutorials. There's a bunch of interactive video platforms like Panocto, PlayPosit, Edpuzzle, and MindMap that enhance that microlearning experience by providing engaging features tailored to video-based instruction. So things like interactive quizzing and annotation can help promote reflection, collaboration, and that immediate understanding. There's digital interactive tools that are a good choice for active learning or more hands-on practice through branching scenarios or simulations or gamification like we've talked about. Those tools like Articulate 360, Adobe Captivate, H5P, ThingLink, they allow learners to interact with content in meaningful ways, whether it's answering questions or exploring scenarios or engaging with those different dynamic elements that help bring concepts to life. They really help transform that passive video lecture type learning into a more active process. And then you can also just use static content. So to the Professor Hale, who's saying, I don't have time to learn TikTok. I get it. I don't even know how to make TikTok videos. I like to consume them, but I can't make them. But you can use just static content for topics that require like clarity and focus, since it allows students to revisit and review material without having to go through an interactive to get to that information. So text-based materials that are good for things like guides and infographics or step-by-step instructions. For that straightforward, easily accessible resources that convey essential information concisely. Tools like Canva, H5P's interactive book feature, even just using the built-in module pages within your LMS are flexible ways to help package that microlearning into more manageable chapters. So then once you've got which format is best to meet your objectives, and you can start to actually develop and build out your content. You'll want to create content that is concise, it's visually appealing, it's something that students can absorb and apply quickly. So incorporating things like real world applications and making sure to use a consistent structure so that learners can build on that previous knowledge and see clear progress, just some motivation to keep going. And then lastly, once you've implemented your microlearning, you also want to monitor its effectiveness by using analytics, student feedback, and evaluate and adapt your approach as needed. So for example, like assessing if you're using videos, whether are they even being watched? And if so, for how long? Maybe not the whole 60 minutes if you've got your lectures posted up there. Um, reviewing quiz scores to identify any learning gaps that you might see that could also give you a good idea of maybe to target where you would frame your next microlearning. And then even just asking your students directly for feedback on the clarity and usefulness of the materials.
Yeah, I love that overview. I mean, that's exactly what we want to do with a faculty member, right? Is what Kaitlin did and
Mhm.
said, "Hey, you're doing some things right.
Yeah,
Let's start there, right? This idea
yeah.
you've chunked into modules. You're already on the way. You're thinking about learning
Mhm.
objectives because you're modularizing your course and you're trying to do short videos, right? And I think that's the way into those conversations is, one, build on what you're already doing, but then two, what's your goal, right? Are you trying
Yeah.
to create more engagement? And then there are some ways that some tools now can help with that. And that's my philosophy with a lot of instructional technology is that it's now letting us do things that we've wanted to do as instructors for a very long time,
Mhm.
and making it interactive, making it engaging, but also modernizing it because students are living in a different world. From my mobile learning um, uh, you know, research, we are in a mobile world. It is. I mean, I'm not going to go into all of, all of my data points around this, but students in particular and us, on the podcast, and the fact that we're doing a podcast now as part of
Right.
professional development
Yeah.
is we're in a different world too, and it looks different. And to Caitlin's point, examine the evidence, right? Look at what are students engaging with or not engaging with, and then rethink it as if you were building this from a modern approach and not necessarily trying to force something into an outdated approach.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Some of kind of our own kind of research or data that we've had is that students don't learn in a very linear fashion, and they're not going to go through your course site on your LMS in a very linear fashion either. And so that's something as well that I kind of stress with instructors, like, well, how can you get this content? How can you give students choice to kind of forge their pathway through it? And I like that Kaitlin brought up the idea of real world examples, right? Because it's always that
Mhm.
question of like, what is the purpose of this? Like, why am I doing this? How can you make that relevant to students as well? And so building those options in, and those paths that are going to show students that, and give them those experiences, I think is important as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that
love that
was.
idea of the real world connection because that's what,
Mhm. Yeah.
we're hearing from everyone about higher
Hmm.
ed, right? It's like,
Yeah.
help me make these real world connections.
Yeah.
And I think we have an opportunity to do that in the courses, in the programs, right, that are
Hmm.
made up of these micro learning experiences,
Yeah.
to rethink it all, right? I mean, not to get
Hmm.
into competency based education, but pretty much everything we're doing in higher ed is
Yeah.
traced back to the credit hour,
Yeah.
which, right, measures time and not learning. But
Hmm.
if we have this approach of, all right, now we know how students are learning, how
Hmm.
professionals are learning, how do we redesign from that vantage point,
Right.
has powerful potential.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And I think we can make it fun too, right?
For
Because
sure.
we talked about gamification and gamified learning a little bit as well. So I want to kind of take that turn a little bit also and say like how can we make that fun? I for one am someone who if you tell me there's a badge or a credential to earn, I want it. I don't care what it is. I want it. You know.
As
Um,
evidenced by the artwork behind
right, yeah,
Adam,
this is
there are
just give
shadow
me
boxes of
yes.
pins and things.
Um, so I think that that idea, for me resonates as far as a gamified concept, right? Is that, like give like let me earn all those badges I can. But what are some like other ways, right, that we can bring that maybe people don't realize, right, are gamified? We always bring up this idea of like Starbucks, right? You get your stamp card at Starbucks, right? And you earn whatever rewards or the more you buy, right? And that's a form of, you know, gamification in a way that people don't realize, right? They're just buying their coffee and enjoying reaping the rewards. But what are some ways that we can have some fun with this concept and this idea and maybe gamify it a little bit? Or have you thought about that? I know this is kind of a curveball question that I
No, it's a great question. Yeah.
came out of nowhere.
I mean, I think about the examples you just gave, right? And there's so many of these that you could point to. One of our courses is around, it's just around digital badges, right? Because that is
Hmm.
part of the game-based
Yeah.
gamification piece. And we have examples, right, from Subaru. Subaru has a badge program. Obviously, Girl Scouts and Boy
Hmm.
Scouts, you've got
Yeah.
badge programs. And this idea of achieving something, and building on it. It's funny, I just now making the connection, Caitlin. This morning in
Right.
our team huddle, we talked about uh, Caitlin took her son to a home improvement store over the weekend, and they actually are creating badges and
Mhm.
levels
Yeah.
to this fun weekend thing. I mean, I don't know
Hmm.
if you wanted to make a
Yeah,
connection
I
there,
was
Caitlin.
thinking the exact same thing of like this little builders workshop that they do with the kids. And yeah, they get a literal badge, like apron that they wear. And then each workshop that you go to, you collect a badge that you
Yeah.
iron on, and then you collect five, and then now you're a like intermediate builder, and you collect 10 and you're this master builder. And yeah, so it definitely is everywhere and starts young. That's for sure. I think it's motivating. I agree that if I see there's something at the end, like it'll motivate me to continue
Hmm.
going. I know we also see like some faculty using like points and leaderboards.
Hmm.
It can be a little bit difficult in like self-paced learning. I know I've got some like interactive games that you can play on a topic. So there's like a feedback battleship game that's related to like giving effective feedback. But yeah, you're collecting points. It's got the game show music. It's got
Yeah.
all the flair versus like reading a static
Yeah.
page on how to give good feedback. So yeah, I'm all about trying to make it fun, engaging, um, just to help learners persist and I think retain more, versus
Oh,
having to
for
reread
sure.
passages. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that brings up, what we know about the gradient effect too, right? It's this idea if I can see where I'm at now and then where I'm
Yeah.
heading, and Adam's like I'm
Hmm.
heading towards a badge, and so I can get
Hmm.
through this piece, or
Hmm.
I see the connection, or if someone's signing up for our program and they see, we've got this Six Sigma certification built in, right? Oh, that's the career I
Mhm.
want, right? That makes it
Right.
a little easier to see the exact connections that we're trying to, put into the learning experiences is to make it more transparent, I would say, and be open about where you're heading with this, and because that does motivate people.
Yeah.
If they see I've got a little bit done, I just need to do this over here now,
Mhm.
and then I can achieve what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
I think that is a motivating factor.
Yeah, and I think that contributes to the idea of lifelong learning as well, right?
Mm, yes.
If you're, there's you do this and you're like, okay, I can see this path, I can go and I can keep going, or maybe it there's a fork in the road at some point, right? And I like want to go down and realize, oh, we're talking about this, I want to go down this other path now. And kind of leads to some other opportunities, some other learning that can take place, which I think is powerful. And that's what we want. We want to inspire and give people those opportunities wherever they can. So very cool. So I guess my next question is what thinking about coming back to your micro learning library with OLC, like what kind of response have you gotten so far from this? Um, and what's next on the horizon.
And Caitlin, you want to share some of the feedback we've seen from the first few folks who've gone through it,
Yeah.
and we can talk about what's next?
Yeah. I think so. We've seen some good feedback already. Just mostly hitting on like the flexibility piece, I
Yeah.
think is huge and like the
Hmm.
biggest win for this program. Our microlearning is mostly designed for busy professionals,
Hmm.
faculty who are teaching a full-time course
Right.
load, and then just trying to fit their professional development in like a lunch and learn or on their lunch break.
Right.
Same thing we talked about with students who are like juggling multiple responsibilities between working, commuting, caretaking. So just a huge benefit of microlearning. But so the flexibility piece has been huge. I think they like the pathway approach and kind of those skills pathways. Definitely AI is still very popular. Always receiving feedback for requests
Yeah.
on that. Accessibility as well
Yeah.
is definitely remained popular. It's definitely coming back around with the Title II updates coming into effect next year. So I've seen a
Hmm.
lot of movement on those as well.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of, it was actually funny. So we originally designed this to just like fill the knowledge gaps and be
Hmm.
more of like strictly professional development. We did not have a credential tied to this because it is meant to be more micro learning, professional development, and then lead into our longer offerings. So like
Right. Okay.
I can in good faith give you a credential to take this like 1 hour microlearning on accessibility and call you an
Right.
accessibility expert versus our longer programs on that topic.
Yeah.
But we did receive a lot of feedback from our like beta testers, especially from like the directors that are kind of monitoring progress of faculty of I want to know how much are they doing? Did they pass this? I'm like, well, we don't really have quizzes in this. There's some practical applications and like hands-on
Yeah.
activities to go practice stuff, but we don't have that. So that is one uh, change we ended up making to our modules of adding, in addition to that practical application, adding a 10-question quiz at the end,
Okay.
just something to report on to. Just, yeah, again, like how much time was spent, that
Yeah.
type of stuff, which can get into debate. But yeah, so kind of listening to our teaching and learning directors' feedback around that
Hmm.
of what is beneficial for them. And then we're still toying with the idea of once we have more modules in there. So like Josh mentioned, it just launched end of last year. We started with
Yeah.
15, just added 3 more for this last quarter. I'm going to be working on more for the next quarter. So once that
Okay.
gets built up, like can these lead into our longer pathways? Like
Yeah.
how can we add on some type of credential or like, yeah, lead more into that. So,
Very cool.
Yeah, I
Well.
think that next step is the piece for us, right? How do we
mhm,
connect this
Hmm.
um, more directly to some of our micro credentials? Because there's
Yeah.
not enough there now to build towards that, but
Mhm.
as we build it out, there certainly could be how do we stack 3 micro-learning modules to be the equivalent of one of our longer
Right.
workshops, right? Or something like that. And one of the surprising findings has been, um, while we intentionally partnered it with or paired it with our workshop passes for longer programs, and by longer, right, we're talking a week long. Folks still just want the micro learning. They're like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no.
Mhm.
Like, we just want to learn totally through
Mhm.
this route,
Right.
which is, I mean, something for us to even reevaluate. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if this is the path forward, then how do we do
Mhm.
that? And we already made some tweaks around that to, track participation,
Yeah.
et cetera. So, yeah.
Well, that is, I think this is so interesting to talk about and look at, and like I said, we're also kind of, looking at our own professional development for faculty and thinking about what that looks like as well. And I appreciate both of you coming and sharing some time and talking about the subject. And um, we'll encourage all of our listeners to go check out onlinelearningconsortium.org and check out the workshops and the micro learning library and everything it has to offer. And if you are attending a conference in the future, look for all of us. I'm sure most, if not all of us, will be there as well. So come chat us up and we can talk more. But Josh and Kaitlin, thank you very much for joining us. This was a fun
Yeah, thank you.
conversation.
Thanks for
Mm,
having
It
us.
was a
Yeah,
lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
awesome. And for listeners, join us in our next episode where we will talk about something else fun and maybe or maybe not be food related. You have to listen and find out. So thank you all, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
The Futures of Digital Learning podcast is a production of the University of Arizona University Center for Assessment, Teaching, and Technology. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas you'd like to share with our office, go to the Contact Us link on our website, ucatt.arizona.edu.